Hello everyone, this is Dragon, and welcome back to another episode of Fire Emblem Heroes. In this episode of the Damage Calc series, we'll be taking a look at effective damage and the weapon triangle from the Damage Calc formula. So let's get straight into it with effective damage. So in this video, we'll be covering two different ways of applying effective damage to an attack stat, but they'll both always generate the correct answer because they're essentially two sides of the same coin. So let's start with some examples. So the first method is simply multiplying the attack stat by 1.5 and rounding down the answer. So in this case, a unit with 53 attack has 79 attack during combat after applying effective damage. And as another example, let's say that you have a unit with 62 attack. You multiply this by 1.5, and you see here that we just have a clean whole integer number, so we don't actually need to round down here. And so a unit with 62 attack has 93 attack during combat with effective damage. The second method is quite similar, but this is more catered towards mental math because the idea is you can just multiply by 0.5 here. So you take half of the attack stat you're working with, you round that number down, and add it to the original attack stat. So in this example here, we have 26.5. We'd round that down to 26. And then we add that to the original attack stat to get the same answer of 79. And doing it in the example of 62 attack, we can multiply by 0.5. We get 31 here, no need to round down anything, and add it back to the original attack stat to get the same answer of 93. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Weapon triangle is quite similar. It's just that we're using different multipliers. So, for example, let's say we have a unit with 57 attack, and we want to apply the standard 20% weapon triangle advantage bonus to attack. For the first method, we can multiply by 1.2 and round down the answer. So in this case, a unit with 57 attack has 68 attack during combat after applying the weapon triangle advantage. And similarly for units with, say, triangle depth 1, you would multiply by 1.3 because 20% plus 10% is an overall 30% bonus to attack. And triangle depth 2 is 1.35, triangle depth 3, 1.4. If you're familiar with the mechanics, you should see where these multipliers are coming from. And then some real jank scenarios where you're working with triangle depth and cancel affinity and things, you can get some odd attack stats like multipliers like 1.15, I believe, or 1.1. But in all these cases, you're always going to round down your answer. So in this particular example, if we manage to get a 10% weapon triangle bonus to attack, we would have an attack stat of 62. The second method is again more catered towards mental math. We can take the attack stat, multiply by the actual bonus to attack. So in this case, for the standard weapon triangle advantage, just 0.2. We round down this answer and add it to the original attack stat. So here we would round down 11.4 to 11 and add it to 57 to get 68. Which you can see is the same answer as the first method. But the nice thing about the second method is that we can also use it to compute weapon triangle disadvantage. Because in this instance, all we have to do is subtract the value we get from the original attack stat rather than add. So again, here in this example, we would round 11.4 down to 11, and we would subtract 11 from 57, the original attack stat, to get 46 attack. And so let's do another example here. Let's say we have a unit with 67 attack, and we want to apply the weapon triangle advantage with triangle adept 1. So here we would multiply by 1.3 and round this down to 87 using the first method. And using the second method, we would take 67, multiply that by 0.3, which is the 30% boost to attack, and round the answer down to 20 here and add it to 67 to get the same answer. So now, talking about weapon triangle disadvantage, we've already discussed one method. We can just take whatever attack stat here, multiply by the percent that we're reducing the attack by. So if we're doing standard weapon triangle disadvantage, it would be 0.2. We round down our answer and subtract it from the original attack stat. So here we would round down 14.6 to 14 and subtract that to get 59. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward, but there's actually a faster way to compute weapon triangle disadvantage on a calculator specifically, but also it can also be useful in mental math. And this method only requires you to do one multiplication, but it is slightly confusing, so hopefully we can make it clear here with some examples. So let's say we have a unit with 57 attack that we want to compute the standard 20% penalty to attack from weapon triangle disadvantage. In this method, we would multiply by 0.8, and again, specifically for this method, we always round up. Always. I want to emphasize that, because otherwise you will be off by one attack, and if you need to be precise in your calculations and you're off by one attack, well, that won't end very well. So always remember in this method to round up. So in this case, we would round up to 46, and we can verify that this is actually the correct answer by using the other method. We round this 11.4 down to 11 and subtract it from 57 to get the same answer, 46. And so the actual multiplier simply comes from the percent attack stat the unit has remaining after reducing it by whatever percentage. That was a weird way to word it, but the idea is for the standard 20% reduction to attack in weapon triangle disadvantage, you have 100% of your attack stat minus 20% from the weapon triangle disadvantage, and you have an overall 80% of your original attack. So along the same vein, if you have, say, triangle adept 3 and you have weapon triangle disadvantage, you have your 100% of your full attack minus 40%, which is the penalty from triangle adept 3 and the standard weapon triangle disadvantage, to give you 60% of your normal attack. So in that case, you would multiply by 0.6. And again, no matter what multiplier you use in this method, you're always going to round up. So in this case, a unit with 59 attack and triangle adept 3 has 36 attack against a unit that they have weapon triangle disadvantage against. So hopefully that's pretty clear. Again, regardless of what multipliers you use here, they're always going to be less than 1, and you're always going to round up. So in this case, we would round this up to 51. So now at this point, we've covered effective damage and weapon triangle separately. Let's put them together. So let's say we have a unit with 43 attack, and we want to apply effective damage and the standard 20% weapon triangle advantage bonus to attack. So in these computations, you always have to apply effective damage first. Otherwise, there are cases where you will be off by, I believe, 1 or 2 attack. And so it's always important to apply the effective damage multiplier first here. So you can do whichever method you prefer, but here you get 64.5. At this point, you have to round down at this step before applying the weapon triangle the weapon triangle multiplier. Otherwise, you may get the incorrect answer. So for this example here, let's say we just decided to multiply straight away the 1.2 for weapon triangle advantage. We get 77.4 here, which will round down to 77. Now instead, if we actually take the 64.5 and properly round down to 64 first, and then apply the weapon triangle advantage multiplier, we get 76. So you can see that the first method, the incorrect method, was 1 attack off. And in general, you're only ever going to be off by at most one attack. So if you don't need to be precise, you can go ahead and just multiply it through without doing any rounding down in the process. So along that same idea, we can just simply multiply the 2 multipliers together and multiply that resulting multiplier by the original attack stat to save calculator input steps. So if you say you don't want to do this, for example, to apply effective damage and the weapon triangle advantage together, we can see here that 1.5 times 1.2 is 1.8. So we can instead just multiply by 1.8 and round down the resulting answer. But again, this method, while it's quicker, it's also can be inaccurate by 1 point of attack. So you do need to be careful if you actually need to be precise with your calculations. You'll want to do each step separately. So again, you apply the effective damage modifier first, and then you round that down, and then you apply the weapon triangle multiplier and work with that accordingly. So in this case, we would get 82, but if we have an odd attack stat like 53, we got to make sure to round down to 79 first, and then apply the weapon triangle advantage. So here we've been working with effective damage and weapon triangle advantage. Same idea for weapon triangle disadvantage. It's just that if you combine different methods, you just have to apply them sequentially. So if we're working with 53 attack and the standard weapon triangle disadvantage, we can multiply by 1.5. We have to round this down to 79. And then we can use the second method for computing weapon triangle disadvantage and round this up to 64. And again, with the multiplier things, we can see that 1.5 times 0.8 is 1.2. So we could alternatively, if we wanted to be a bit faster in our computations, we could just multiply by 1.2, which you can recognize is also the same thing as the weapon triangle advantage bonus of 20%. So in general, it's not completely precise for every attack stat, but effective damage combined with weapon triangle disadvantage is extremely similar to just simply having weapon triangle advantage. So that's why effective damage in general is pretty powerful. But at this point, you should be able to do all your calculations with effective damage and weapon triangle correctly using the damage calc formula. So that's going to be it for this episode. In the next episode, we'll be taking a look at modifying the defense stats. So for example, defense tiles or the enemy proccing a mitigation reduction special like Luna or Moonbow. and also working with boosted damage specials like Bonfire or Ignis, Iceberg, Blue Flame. All those kind of specials we'll be covering in the next episode. So until then, thanks for watching. As always, this is Ether Dragon, and hope to see you all next time. Bye.